Hello, welcome to Vineyard KC West podcast. For more information, visit us at vineyardkcwest.com.
If you have been with us or haven't, we're in the Story of Ruth. And so it's an Old Testament book, and it kind of bridges the gap in between when the people of Israel came into the Promised Land and when they chose to have kings. And so it was the time of the judges. So God would raise up different leaders to rescue his people that got into trouble. Because they were basically the equivalent of toddlers, just like you're constantly just protecting. And so he'd raise up these people to help them with that. But the story of Ruth itself is all about redemption. Redeeming something, redeeming the worth of something. And it's redeeming the worth of people and ultimately all of creation. Naomi and Ruth are two widows at the point in the story. They both lost their husbands, and they decide, hey, let's head back to Bethlehem, where Naomi's from, and let's seek God. Let's seek God in the midst of this tragedy. Let's see what God can do. And then last week we saw that Ruth, who's the younger one, really the daughter-in-law of Naomi, she says, I'm going to go work. I'm going to go out into the field and I'm going to get the harvest. And so things were set up that the poor, which they were, and the foreigner could go and glean from what was left from the field. And so, you look out here in the fields, everybody's baling hay right now, right? And so it'd be like whatever's left behind, they would actually 30% behind. The poor and the foreigners that didn't have jobs and work couldn't be provided for, they would be able to come and pick that up. And so today we see beauty rise out of that brokenness, because their story is really a hard one. And it's not lost on you that some stories in here, like if we went around, we could share our stories, the things that have happened to us in our lives, how we've been let down, and the tragedies and the hard things, and even the longings of our heart, even this morning, that brokenness. And so what we see this morning is we start to see beauty rise up in the midst of the brokenness. And when I think of beauty coming out of brokenness, I think of Joseph Purdy. And Joseph is a gentleman that I met in Morro Bay, California, when we planted a vineyard church there. And if you ask my sons, the way you plant a church is you walk around neighborhoods and pass out gum. They just, because that's what we did. That's one of the things we did when we started the church. We just kind of walked around and had little flyers. We're starting a church, meeting at the elementary school. And so we put gum, handed people. And so I was walking by and I saw Joseph, and he had this big trailer with just all sorts of different pieces of wood. Just all sorts of different sizes, different types of wood. And I handed it to him, and he said, I don't want the gum. I'm not into it, whatever. And interested in the church. And he ended up coming some and hanging out, he and his family. But I asked him, I said, what's all this wood? And it just light bulbs went on. And he said, let me share with you just the beauty, the timeless beauty of wood. And I'm just, okay. And my dad was a carpenter and contractor, and so I understood wood, and my dad's a woodworker. But what he shared with me is that he would do big projects and whatnot, but anytime that he could, he would go to big job sites or other places, and if he saw wood being thrown away or wood just being tossed into a pile that it doesn't have a use, he would take it and he would build beautiful things out of it. He would sand it down or cut it or work it, and he would just absolutely, or carve it, and he would bring the beauty that was there redeemed out of it. But the hard thing is that before Joseph touched it, it was just in a pile. And somebody had said it has no value for what's happening. But as soon as it got in the carpenter's hands, beauty came out of it. Brokenness out of beauty, and wood finds redemption in Joseph's hands, and it still does today. I was looking online because I couldn't remember. I wanted to make sure I had my facts straight because it's been a few years, and I saw that he was at the city council, and they would have a business spotlight, and it says the business spotlight this month was Joseph Purdy, and talking about the timeless beauty of wood. And it's just right. I mean, and then I thought about that. Well, that's like Jesus. You look at all this brokenness and all the piles that we have in life, and you look at people, right? That we have so many piles of people, essentially, in life. And Jesus comes along and just, let me tell you the timeless beauty of people. And it made me think of a song by the band All Sons and Daughters called Brokenness Aside. And the story is that their church in Nashville, like, there's people making mistakes and blowing it, and some fell into sin and different things, and they were just but it was kind of overtaking as people's identity, like, oh, God's done with me, or I've blown it too far, and so they wrote this song about that, and this is some of the words of it. It says, "Will your grace run out if I let you down? Because all I know is how to run, because I'm a sinner. If it's not one thing, it's another, caught up in words, tangled in lies, but you're a savior. And you take brokenness aside and make it beautiful. You make it beautiful." And that's what God does with people, is he takes people aside from the pile where there's no worth, and he takes it aside and he makes it beautiful. And so that's what we're talking about today. And I was talking to Barbara Whitley, part of our church here, and last Sunday, and she made a comment. She said, beauty isn't perfect. Yeah, she doesn't tweet, but she should. Beauty isn't perfect. The world and all the messages say that beauty is perfect. Like beauty that is just lifted up, that's perfect. And so I just ask you, as we go into this passage and you start to see this brokenness become beautiful because of the work of God and the plan of God and the providence of God, I just ask you, like, what would it take for you to call your life beautiful? Well, Cody, I'll call this part of my life beautiful, but all this other stuff, no. Like your entire all-encompassing life, what would it take for you to call your life beautiful and just call it that? And that's what we look at today. So in verse 14 of chapter 2 of Ruth, it says, "At mealtime, Boaz called to her," so Ruth was out in the fields harvesting, and she's been doing this all day. This is all just one day, chapter 2. And he says, "Come over here and help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread in the sour wine." So she sat with his harvesters, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. So she took a doggy bag, right? That's basically what happened. She's full and she wanted to take more. And she's poor and she's a foreigner. And so she's in a bad state. Verse 15, it says, "When Ruth went back to work again, Boaz ordered his young men, let her gather grain right among the sheaves without stopping her, and pull out some heads of barley from the bundles and drop them on purpose for her. Let her pick them up and don't give her a hard time." So look at this scenario. You have this woman that just said, she starts out the day saying, maybe I'll go into the field of someone and I'll find blessing. I'll find what we need. And all of a sudden she ends up in the field of Boaz. And if you're picking up on it, hopefully you are, there's a little bit of romance happening too. Like there's just a little bit of stuff. So she comes in amongst the reapers, even though she wasn't one. And she gets to sit amongst them and share in this meal. And that's kindness. But then to the point where Boaz says, "Hey, come dip this." And it was probably it was a grain cake. It was probably cooked in oil. And then you would take that and you would dip it in this wine that was kind of a part of the fermenting process of the wine. But if you drank it, it would have not been very good. It would have been sour. You wouldn't really want to drink it. But it was more kind of like a dressing, like a salad dressing. And so he invites her, "Hey, come dip your grain cake in this." That's way better than "Do you come here often?" Or "Have I seen you before?" It's saying like, "Hey, come on in and dip this in here." Like she has to know at this point, like, "Oh, you're not just being nice to me." And he does this in front of everybody. He's courageous. He's kind of like, "I really like her." And everybody's looking around like, "Man, the boss likes her." But then when she gets up, he says to her, or to his workers, like, hey, let her do whatever she wants, basically. Like, even though what she set out to do, like what she is allowed to do, is just pick up what's left, to glean what's left, I want you to intentionally drop, like, some of the best stuff for her. Isn't that like God? Isn't that like God, that, like, creatively and attentively and affectionately is designing blessing for us? He's working in our lives and pulling things together. And there's all these little things that he drops for us all around. And it's just grace, right? It's unmerited favor. Now, in a minute, we'll talk about work, because grace and work go together. But this is just all unmerited favor. In other words, she worked hard because that's the way the system was set up. Like, she could go glean. But there's this other favor here, and that's so like God. It's not based upon our own abilities or performance. So isn't that like the kingdom, where God just invites in, and, you know, even though we're not a part of it? It's kind of like the church too. Like, when I came to church for the first time when I was 15 years old, I didn't fit in with anybody. I didn't have, you know, the righteousness of anybody, or, you know, just look around. I mean, I didn't use the right language. I mean, used altogether the wrong language. And so, but I got to go amongst these people and these families. So me coming in from a broken home, these families invited me in, and they'd have me over and cook for me, and they'd have this glorious thing called potlucks. You know, I didn't know I was supposed to bring something too, but I got amongst these people, and I belonged before I believed, because they just loved me. In my broken story started to become beautiful because I got around them. And that's a picture of the church and the kingdom, isn't it? I mean, like, there's so much pressure. You may feel it like, well, as a Christian, what am I supposed to do? Just invite people in. Hey, come dip your bread. Hey, come and eat with us. Come and experience the goodness of the harvest with us. That's really just the responsibility of the follower of Jesus. It's just like, come on into the goodness. Just come on into the goodness. You don't have to be a great arguer. Just invite them into the goodness. And that's what we see here. So getting to beautiful in our lives depends on, it really depends on who we link up with. So Ruth is finding beautiful in her life because she's linking up with Boaz. And Boaz is showing her beautiful. There's a book called Managing Leadership Anxiety. And so it's written to leaders and specifically pastors and churches and stuff. And there's a concept in there that he has, which is, there's an idea that's truth, but then he takes it further to a concept that, you know, when we walk into a room, you know, you can feel the feel of the room. So sometimes you walk into a room and it just feels good. And so you link up to whoever is helping bring that good feeling. But then if it feels bad, let's say it's anxious, like, you link up to that anxiety. See, a lot of times, you know, if you experience anxiety, it's not your own. You're just linking up to what's around you. Like, that's how God made us. If we don't manage it, we'll link up to, you know, if things are really unhealthy and anger, I'll link up to that. You know, and okay, it's good now, I'll link up to that. So that we have a inner core that we manage as well. But the concept in the book is this, is that he says, you know, when you walk into a room, no matter whether it's good or whether it's super anxious or it's bad, link up to Jesus. Because he's always the least anxious person in the room. And I had a chance to incorporate that this week. One of my sons and I, on Tuesday, we made a quick trip. We have some family items we needed to bring back to Kansas City from Southern California. And so we flew in on Tuesday, packed the stuff, and came out here, and Apple Maps almost death by GPS. I went, there's this one route, and I'm like, okay, I don't like driving fast downhill in anything. I just kind of developed that, especially when there's weather and stuff. And so I'm like, okay, this is like a cool route to cut 40 minutes off. And so we get up on this mountain pass, and the hail's coming down and the things, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, we're okay. And my son's sitting there, and so I start to get anxious. And then I notice that he's anxious, because I've known him his whole life, I know. And And then we talked about it a little bit later. I'm all, hey, so you kind of got anxious there, huh? And he goes, yeah. And I said, at what point? And he goes, well, I noticed you were. Like I sensed something about, I'm like, exactly. And I said, so what we both can do is like we can, link up to Jesus because he's here with us. And he's not anxious. So there was other points that were kind of scary and other points and all sorts of things. And so at those points, I really tried. And I said, hey, isn't that beautiful, that view? And he goes, yeah, it is, but you're anxious again, huh? And I'm like no, I'm like, but right, you always have a choice who you link up to. You always have that. And if you link up to Jesus, then just like Joseph with his wood or Jesus with people, Jesus is always taking everything and he's calling it beautiful. And he's working with it and making it beautiful. And so if we link up to him in our lives, we can look at our lives and call it beautiful. And it's like John chapter 16, verse 33. It says, I have told you all this is Jesus speaking, so that you may have peace in me. And he talked about the Holy Spirit, and he talked about how he's going to be with the Father, and he and the Father are going to be together, and how he's going away, but they're going to be okay. And he says, here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows. Right? We're going to have brokenness. We just do. It's broken. It's being redeemed, and it's coming together, and the kingdom of God is going to continue to invade, and ultimately everything's going to be set right. But right now we're in the midst of it. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. That's who you want to link up to in life. That's who you want to grab onto. The one that says, there's issues, but take heart, I've overcome it, and everything's turning beautiful, and I'm making it new. And so that's grace, we see that, but then we also see work too. So verse 17, it says, so Ruth gathered barley there all day, and when she beat out the grain that evening, it filled an entire basket. She carried it back into town and showed it to her mother-in-law. Ruth also gave her the roasted grain that was left over for a meal. Where did you gather all this grain today? Naomi asked. Where did you work? May the Lord bless the one who helped you. So Ruth told her mother-in-law about the man in whose field she worked. She said, the man I worked with today is named Boaz. And so Ruth worked from sun up to sundown, literally. And so the grain, it would, she's got a basket, and so she kneel down, pick it up, put it in the bag. Kneel down, repeat, repeat, repeat. Stop to eat lunch, stop to eat dinner. And her work after dinner was probably a lot more interesting. When you're excited and you see something good in your life, and she's like, wow, this is amazing. Her brokenness is turning into beauty, and so she's thinking about that. It's going quicker. But she would have taken the grain to the threshing floor. And the threshing floor was a community threshing floor in most communities. And so it would be the hard surface that everyone would go to. So there was probably others at the end of the day threshing their grain as well, and they would take a stick or a rock and beat the staff, and so that the chaff would separate from the grain, and then you'd take that and put that in the basket or container. And it says that she had about an ephah of grain, and so like the 5-gallon buckets from Home Depot or Menards, those ones. Well, an ephah was probably about 5.5 gallons of grain. So to help you think, that was the allotment of grain for 1 month for the working males. And she got that in one day. So remember that all of this takes place not in a vacuum, but amongst people. And so there's others beating out their grain and doing this, and they're looking, and they're thinking, who is this woman? Who is this foreigner? Who is this person, that she's here doing this? And she's got this load of, it's probably 35 to 50 pounds of it. And so however she's bringing it back, and she has to bring it back to town, and then she's got her doggy bag for her mother-in-law with the food, and she's just kind of walking in, she's beat. But just look at the blessing. Look at the blessing that's there. And this is what it's like when we say to Jesus, you know what, I surrender my life to you. There's grace, and then there's work. And you join the two together, and her mother-in-law joins them together. She goes, she sees blessing, but she also sees you worked. And so that's like the kingdom, and that's like the church too. You will never experience all that God has for you in relationship with him unless you put it out there. Unless like you serve others, unless you work with others in the church or in the outreach of the church or people in the community and serving them and helping them, going for it, in doing that with Jesus. I don't even think understand what Jesus has done for you until you sacrifice and it hurts. Because when you do, he says, yeah, this is it. And Paul said that. Paul, one of the first followers of Jesus, wrote, he says, I want to know Christ. And he talks about knowing him like in his sufferings. Because Jesus is one that served and suffered. And so faith that costs us something, that work. So it's the grace receiving, but then it's the work too. And so she brought the leftovers. That's part of work too, self-control, having self-control. So grace and work come together, and we see this picture. But again, it's because she's linked up with Boaz, who's linked up with God, and she's getting to know God. So it's who you're linked up to that you're able to grab grace and work together. On our trip, my son and I, we stayed in hotels. We made bathroom stops. We made food stops. We made gas station stops, and it's amazing the difference. You have one gas station, and the purpose is the same thing, which is to provide gas and a bathroom for people and maybe snacks and that sort of thing. The hotel, the purpose is the same thing. The food place is the same thing. But we'd walk into some places and literally we're kind of like back out slowly. you know, bathrooms or other places like, no, yeah, we're going to keep going. Or gas stations, what is going on here? Or you walk into one gas, say, hey, how's it going? You guys have a bathroom? I'll be with you in a minute. In another place, yeah, hey, how's it going? Here's the key. Other places. We went into some food places, and you're kind of like, okay, should we eat this? And the answer is yes. We don't have any other choice. But I'll tell you what, Jersey Mike's in Santa Fe, New Mexico, stop there. The guys, hey, welcome, how you doing? How's it going? And the food was fantastic, and just everybody's there, and there was new employees, and employees that had been there a long time, and the new employee on the cash register was kind of like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know. Hey, you're cool. And the other guys, hey, no problem, man, we'll help you. It was just this beautiful thing. Because they called what they were doing beautiful. They decided that this would be something that other people would enjoy and be a part of. And it's just who you link up to. And of course, you're probably thinking with me, it's leadership, right? Like at all these places, it goes down to the leader, like the leader or the boss or the owner, they decided that this place would be a place of beauty and not a place of just kind of blah. I'm not getting into details, but like one of the best places in the whole trip was this one bathroom. It was just beautiful. Like no joke. It was just like I would have eaten like something in there. It was just incredible. You're sitting in the truck, hot and sweaty, and you get in and you walk in there. It was refreshing. I was just like, wow, these people really love what they do, and they do that. And then there was this other one where you kind of felt like you were a part of a horror movie. And there was a graveyard next door, and both my son and I, hey, this is kind of scary. Yeah, let's get out of here. And so it's a choice who you link up to. And so in verse 20, we see Ruth, it says, Naomi says, may the Lord bless him, Naomi told her daughter-in-law. He is showing his kindness to us as well as your dead husband. That man is one of our closest relatives, one of our family redeemers. Then Ruth said, what's more, Boaz even told me to come back and stay with his harvesters until the entire harvest is completed. Good, Naomi exclaimed. Do as he said, my daughter. Stay with his young women right through the whole harvest. You might be harassed in the other fields, but you'll be safe with him. So Ruth worked alongside the women in Boaz's fields and gathered grain with them until the end of the barley harvest, and then she continued working with them through the wheat harvest in early summer. And all the while she lived with her mother-in-law. And so in verse 20, we see this person. Remember, if you've been following with us, Naomi's name means pleasant. when she came back to Bethlehem, which is her hometown, people said, "Is this Naomi?" And she goes, "Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara," which means bitter. Is this the same person? You see, this brokenness just transformed. And that's the question that we all have is can I truly be changed? Can my brokenness truly be changed? Can my story truly be changed? Does the gospel, does Jesus Christ really have the power to change even me? And we see it in her life as God's doing this, and he's bringing that in. Now, and it talks about a family redeemer or a kinsman redeemer. And so the kinsman redeemer, their job was to help anybody within the tribe or within the family system, help them when they were in trouble. And so if they were harmed or somebody was murdered, it was the job of the kinsman redeemer to go find the person that did it. If someone stole property, it was their job to go find the property for the people. If there was a legal case, it was their job to go represent the family in court. Like, they had care because they were a part of this tribe and this family. That was the job of the kinsman redeemer. And so you start to see hints here of, part of what's bringing beauty is that they're entering into this belonging. They went from widows in another land and in that place as foreigners. Ruth wasn't a foreigner, that was her hometown, but now she's a foreigner here. And so she just feels out there. She feels just away from everybody else. And so we see our greatest need, which is belonging. And I will tell you that when you experience belonging, you then are able to call your life beautiful. And it happens amongst the people of God, and it happens with Jesus because Jesus is our kinsman redeemer. Think about that. Jesus calls all people of every tribe and every tongue, and he says, for God so loved the world that God gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him would not perish but would have everlasting life. So he says whosoever, and he says like every tribe and every tongue, everyone can come and be a part of my tribe. Everyone can come and be a part of my family. And if so, I'm your kinsman redeemer. And he starts with your relationship with him, your salvation and relationship. And when he does that, he says, I've got you. There's nothing too small for Jesus. There's nothing in your life that he's not interested in. There's nothing in your life that he won't work in. There's nothing in your life that he isn't bigger than and can handle. And if he doesn't fix it and take care of it, he'll show you that it's actually not a big deal. He's involved in every area. He actually gives you favor because you're a part of his family and you belong with him. And so the barley harvest started in May, and then it would go in near the end of May, and then the wheat harvest would come in. And so it's like, hey, come for more. Just bountiful blessing. Come to the next harvest. Boaz is inviting her. Look at the language in the passage, the words of come back, right? I mean, doesn't that feel good when somebody says come back? I remember when I was a kid, my aunt got married in Texas. And she married this guy with a big old mustache out here, first time to Texas, and just it's true, everything's bigger in Texas. And everywhere I went, it said, now you come back, y'all. Come back, y'all, you hear? Is that right? Anyways, but yeah, it was, y'all come back, So yeah, it's not right. I'm totally botching it. But you get the point. I just walked everywhere, and ever since then, I've wanted to go back to Texas. And because it was just amazing. Everybody said, y'all come back now, you hear? There we go. Yeah, hey, all right, got it. Okay. And so, but, come back. That's what Boaz and everybody's saying. Come back. It makes you feel like belong. And then also, too, it says stay and working alongside and working with them and continued with them. And she lived with her mother-in-law. All these things, just this belonging, this together. And you guys, that's the thing that will allow you to call beautiful in your life, is that belonging with others, with Jesus. Now, the opposite is true. If you isolate yourself in your brokenness, you will struggle to call anything beautiful. Because you have to choose who you're going to link up with. You're going to have to choose who does that. And Jesus makes everything beautiful in his time. And so, what do we do with this? Well, number one is that think through how you've colored in the picture of your life. Can you call it beautiful? Or maybe there's moments that you're like, I don't know. And I will tell you this is, like when we got out there for our trip, everything was going perfect until we got there to pick up the truck. It was on track. Like we got there and my mom goes, hey, let's go to In-N-Out Burger. All right, yeah. And so we have In-N-Out Burger. We go to the rental place. No one's there. And so it begins. 3.5 hours later, we walk out of it, and it's totally inconvenient. And I actually, handled myself pretty well, through the process, through phone calls to the corporate company and the purse, all these things. And, but the Lord was speaking to me. He says, Cody, a lot of times I work in inconvenience. A lot of times I work in trouble. Because in the midst of things, they actually didn't have the truck I wanted, which only could fit my stuff, according to my knowledge. So I got something smaller. In the midst of that, they cut our total bill in half, which was a significant amount. And then actually, we fit everything in it. So it was this glorious thing, this blessing that God was able to work, and all it took me was 3.5 hours and in the midst of it. Reminds me of Charles Spurgeon, 19th century preacher in England. He was invited one time to speak to a bunch of pastors and ministers and elders about, his topic was, how does God make a great pastor? And you could equate it to, how does God make a great Christian or a great follower of Jesus or just a strong, mature person? And so the legend goes, incredible preacher and could preach for a long time, but he gets up, puts his stuff down, he gets up there, and he had a commanding presence, big old beard, and he gets up and he says one word and sits down. Trouble. That's how God makes a great pastor or preacher or Christian, is trouble. And it's not that God brings the trouble, but it's that we are in this place, this world, and trouble happens. And Jesus said, in this life you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome it. So trouble is always this place, brokenness is always this place where Jesus is saying, yes, you have your place, you're in a place of trouble, you're in a place of brokenness, and he calls you and he says, link up with me. Because as you give your life to Jesus, you're not immune to trouble. There's everybody else. He protects us and moves, but there's the unknown. But in the midst of it, he says, link up with me, and I make all of this beautiful. I bring it aside and make it beautiful. So what would it take for you to call your life beautiful? And there's moments, and you say, Cody, there's nothing that would make that beautiful. And I know it's hard because there's things in my life that I would sit there and say, no, that's failure, or I totally blew it on that, or I did that. But then what is beautiful is that brokenness is made into beauty. It's not about the thing being beautiful, because there's horrible things that have been done to you in here. There's horrible things that have happened to you in here. But it's Jesus that then takes your life, like Joseph with the wood that's thrown away to the pile, and then he takes it and he works with it and he molds it and he makes it to something, and he joins it up with other wood where they belong. And then you look, and now it's beautiful. So the beautiful has to do with what Jesus does with it, not the event.
Thanks for listening this week. If you're looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, please visit vineyardkcwest.com.